Welcome to the session. It's great to have you here again, and this is the second time that you've joined us for an international series. So we're absolutely delighted that you've given up the time. I appreciate the time you've given up to support us with the international series. And so the first time we met, we kind of talked about your book, kind of leading impact teams there. Note all the post-its, please. And we kind of did a kind of background to that, and we saw some of the impact from that work, and we saw videos of learners in Paul's school and how they can engage and what they've taken from that. So today is really about kind of looking at the protocols, isn't it, and kind of the processes and how I suppose it's the how of the leading impact teams in the work. So without me saying anything else, I'm going to hand over to you, Paul, to kick us off and to kind of take us through that this afternoon in the time that we've got.
Sure. And we're both really excited to be here. We were excited to plan yesterday for today. So the focus of today is really, last time was to kind of get us acquainted with the why behind impact teams, that it's really about teams being relentless and their focus on quality formative assessment, and that we know when we're going in the right direction is when kids can answer those feedback questions, right? Where am I going? Where am I at? What's my next step? Why am I learning this? How can I connect what I'm learning today to other things that I know? And so that's really the goal of impact teams. And everyone likes to think it's about the protocols, but the protocols are just the way to get to reach the goal. And they make things really practical for teacher teams and leadership teams, or even like district teams in our country, or an LEA in your country, right? So so today we're really going to just dig into this idea of evidence analysis and action, and I'm going to shoot it over to Paul because we're going to do it first. Look at evidence analysis and action through the lens of data from the mood meter, and this is giving credit. This comes from Yale University. You can get on. We talked about this at the last Blether as well, but we want to just make sure that we're giving credit to Yale and Mark Brackett for his work. I'll shoot this over to Paul. We're going to do some data analysis from the mood meter.
So good. I'm not even sure. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon. Paul's good morning. I'm still morning. I think you all are good afternoon. And thank you for let me share my screen and kind of talk through this here. And I can't see you now, but Paul, can you see the screen? You can see the
I can.
Wonderful. So this is how you all are feeling. And I was fortunate enough to go to Yale and actually study with Dr. Brackett a couple of summers ago. And the thing, I think the most important thing, one of my lines that comes very well rehearsed is that none of this matters unless it gets in the hands of the kids, in the hands of the students. But the way that we make sure that it gets there is that we always begin with the adults, and we'll start that very same way today. This is how you're feeling, and this is real time. The link is in the chat if you haven't had an opportunity to do that. Again, it's real time. A lot of curious folks. Somebody's feeling a little bit tense, calm. Somebody just checked in as being engaged. But the formative assessment process and even impact teams is really about meeting students and teachers and everyone else, especially now where they are. And when was the last time, something that really had an impact on me is, when was the last time we asked ourselves how we were feeling? Was the last time we asked our staff, our teachers, or anyone else how they were feeling? And then if we are asking those questions, what do you do when they tell you how they're feeling? Someone's feeling engaged, enthusiastic, happy, motivated, curious. What do we do with that? Why is it important? How is it relevant? And by the way, just a spoiler alert, feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are. And we never panic when we see anyone in the red. Sometimes we have students over here. We want students to feel. The idea is that, and we want everyone to feel, but if we can name how we're feeling and we think about how we're feeling, then we can tame how we're feeling. And that lends itself to executive function, and all of those type of things. I want to keep that nice and short. This is the mood meter. It's how we begin just about everything at PS13 with staff, with students, and even with parents.
Cool. So, Paul, I'm going to share here when you get done. And we're just going to now, thank you for that. And we're just going to now, and I'm looking for my share. Okay, here we go. We're just going to kind of take a look at, let me find it here. There we go. I'm not used to Google Meet. I'm used to Zoom. So if I'm a little frantic, that's why. So here we go. So Paul just checked us in, and we saw that a lot of you were in the yellow and green. And as you can see in this mood meter, you know, the emotions inside those quadrants are really varied, right? And Paul already spoke to the benefits of naming our emotions, that it diffuses charge, it lessens the burden, it allows us to step back, it allows us to discover the nuances and feelings, to take responsibility, to self-regulate. And then in our country, we have the social emotional national organization called CASEL. There's two big competencies regarding self-awareness and self-management, and it helps us to gain insight. And then I think Paul said this quote, we have to name emotions to tame it. But we can look at any sort of evidence through the evidence analysis action framework. And so today we're going to be exploring 3 or 4 protocols. It just kind of depends on our time. But we're going to be looking at it through this lens that, you know, here's what, in this case, we have some mood meter data. And then the next step, so what story is this evidence or data telling us? And so we would ask people to make inferences based on that data. And we're going to do that in a minute. And then the last step, what are we going to do about it, right? And so this framework lives through all 10 protocols. We've just created another one with a district in Texas. And so, but every single time that we create a protocol, we use this framework. What's the evidence? And the evidence could vary. It could be implementation evidence. So it could be around observation data. If you're going to classrooms and looking for a particular practice, you could boil it down to some baseline evidence statements. So what is that data telling us? And now what are we going to do about it? And I think the thing to really remember with that is when we do that, when we think about what are we going to do about it, we want to be thinking about the things that get the highest impact, right? And now more than ever, we know what those things are. And so it's really trying to leverage those things like feedback, classroom discussion, collaborative learning, you know, all those things that we know get high effect. And that's what we do when we get to the action side. So we're just going to kind of play around with this a bit to kind of start the morning. So I am going to release myself from that screen. I can't find my cursor, of course. Where is it? Okay, here it is. And we're going to actually look through a template. I'm going to use the micro teaching template. Actually, let's just talk through it. It'll be easier. So we had the mood meter data. We saw that folks were in the yellow and green. What does that mean? What story? And this means that you guys can participate in the chat, or you could unmute and say things out loud. But we saw that data, you know, pretty distinctly, that we had a lot of yellow and green there. So what inferences could we make about what's going on in people's lives right now at this moment, like 6 o'clock or whatever time it is there, right? Like what inferences could we make? And I'm going to make, I'll model one first. So the data might be telling us that people are in a pretty good open place to learn, right? Like from looking at this data, it seems like we might have some openness to learning some new things. And then when we dug a little deeper, there seems to be a lot of curiosity out there. So this data is really informative, you know, so this could really benefit us as instructional leaders as to what our actions might be. Now if the data was showing something completely different, that would also give us some indication about how we should proceed, right? And I got to tell you, if we saw the data a lot in the red and blue, depending on the different indicators, we might decide to push you off into breakouts and to name something that you're really proud of, that you're doing, because we know that when we are grateful or when we speak about our strengths, serotonin is released and we start to feel better, right? And so that would be kind of an example of the analysis, and then what actions would we take? And I do that a lot with my staff. I have 75 folks on our staff for Core Collaborative. First thing we do is check in. And if I see that things are off, I have to take care of that. So let's kind of tinker around with this a little bit. Paul, you can leave that up. I thought that was cool.
Oh, okay.
What other inferences could you make about people right now in terms of learning and where they're at based on this data that you're seeing on the mood meter? Let's just get a couple of people to share.
Thanks, Paul. So anyone like to come in with what does that say to you about what might you maybe assume from that, or what can you take from that? Would anyone like to come in? Joanne, would you like to come in?
I was just saying that if I was looking at it, I would think that people are relaxed and they're more willing to learn. They're quite open, and they're not too low or too high anywhere across the board. So, and we're all kind of in the same place, really. Yeah. A little bit more energy. Some of us have maybe had a longer day than others. So I look at it like that.
Yeah. And I think that like what I love about the inference that you made, Joanne, is that it's just trying to get to the story, because it's not really about the analytical data. It's about the story behind the data and the story behind the evidence. Is there another one that would like to jump in?
Anyone else? Andrew, would you like to come in?
I wasn't going to, but I will do. I was just I was sitting on my phone sitting on the room. I'm just thinking that we've all signed up to be here. We've all signed up to learn from this input. We all want to hear what you've got to say. That's very different from a classroom environment where the kids have got to be there. So there's an element of that. We're happy to be here because we chose to be here.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point here, that like our kids don't have any choice to be there. So I think that's why this data is even more important to some degree, right? Like we're all coming together because we all want to learn from each other today, us included. So I think Paul, I'd like to just get you to share a little bit about how you use this data, and more importantly, to our last speaker's point, we're checking in and kids might not even want to be there. So what are some of the actions that your teachers take when they see some evidence that might give them some insight into how kids are feeling, and they want to take care of that immediately?
Yeah, so I've got about 15 stories, and so let me just see if I could just...
Let's just do one or two.
Just do, you said two.
Short ones. We already talked about this.
The first one that I'll tell you about is that the teachers use this with not every classroom in my building. I have about 37 different classrooms in this building. But one teacher in particular asks the students to check in multiple times a day. What she found out is that the data from her students on the mood meter changes from the morning until right after lunch. At lunch, she found that when the students were coming back, many of them were in the red, not feeling as pleasant because the lunchroom and running around and who's teasing and who's sitting by themselves. 2 points there. They have a conversation about why they're feeling, and we do get students feeling comfortable enough. One boy said, and he was new to us from Honduras, and there's a 5th grade student that I'm talking about. He wanted to know why nobody sat with him and talked to him at lunchtime. And so the students countered with, well, you don't really say anything. You don't talk to anyone. And so they had this dialogue to where people's needs were being met about who they were as people. Now, lunchtime at my school is lunchtime in my school, and there are winners and there are losers depending on whatever they're playing that day. That really affects 10-year-olds' dispositions after lunch. The teacher, because some kids came back in red and green, didn't tell them how to feel. We're not in the business of telling anyone how to feel, but she strategically planned debates because students were coming in feeling very high energy, but not very pleasant. And what we've learned through studying this and formative assessment, meet kids where they are, it wasn't a good time for them to sit and read independently. We found a better time during the day for that.
Now, Paul,
Yep.
I don't want to cut you off, but I'm looking at our time here, and I think we only have like a little bit long, so we're almost halfway there. So we're just going to do one example. Is that cool?
Understood. Yeah, no, that's good.
Paul,
Okay,
can I jump in and ask a quick question of Paul? And I am watching time,
Of
but I'm
course
just
you
interested.
can. Of course you can do that.
Did you see a difference in how pupils engaged in that over time in terms of, I'm just thinking about culturally, sometimes it's difficult initially to think about feelings and to adapt to that. Did you notice over time that changed and people got more comfortable with it?
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I've been reading a lot of Fullen lately, and what I've learned in the book is that you can reculture or you can restructure. And in our case, I made a decision with some teachers to bring in this social emotional learning piece. And through that restructuring, we've recultured the building to really think about where are we as adults when we're delivering instruction and engaging students in the formative assessment process. So when I marry what Fullen is saying to what I've learned from, I want to call him Dr. Bloomberg, but I just call him Paul now because he's my friend. Formative assessment is something that we do with students and not at students or for students. We do it with them. Finding out where they are emotionally has recultured the building, and that's where impact is as a learning community. I can wave a wand and say, you're teaching this now, and it isn't going to result in student achievement or any teacher teams learning or realizing anything different. It's reculture piece. And then one more answer, I promise I'll stop talking. Everything that we do here at PS13 has to do with engagement. And that was a word that you used in your question. For us, it's about engaging students, because if we're going to do formative assessment with students, then they had better be engaged. And we've got to know where they are in order to pull out of them what we want them to be able to do, understand, demonstrate, any other word we want to put on the end of that sentence.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Paul.
and I think the last time one of the questions was like, how is our work different with formative assessment than others? Is we've really, and really because of the experimentation that Paul and I have been doing over the last few years, we've really tried to integrate the SEL, social emotional piece, into the formative assessment process. And I don't know others that are really doing that, but we've been at it for a few years and we're getting better and better and better at it. So we're going to try, now it says dismiss. It says I can't share my screen. So I'm going to try again. We are, let's see if that works. Is it letting me? You guys see my screen?
Yeah, it's
Here it
coming. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to engage in a little bit of micro teaching, and we're going to come back to the EAA protocol. And the goal is that we're going to get through this. I'm doubtful that we will get through all of this, but we'll try because we're already halfway through. And it really doesn't matter. I think today was about experiencing some of the protocols on a more practical level. So we already experienced EAA through looking at evidence that would be perception data, right? The perception, gathering data about how our stakeholders are feeling, whether it be, our kids, whether it be our community, whether it be our teachers, right? And so our goal is always to develop assessment capable, emotionally capable, and socially capable kids. And we have a parallel framework. right? And we're not going to dig too much into that just because of time. But we have 10 purposeful protocols, and they're all designed to get to different things. And it's not for a leader to choose what protocol a team uses. It's for the team to use based on their purpose. So if we want to really understand like the impact that we're having on instruction, chances are we're going to analyze some student work. And those protocols underneath it are all the different protocols we'd use for that. If we want to check in on the implementation of the formative assessment practices that we'll dig into in a second, we have 2 protocols regarding quality implementation, right? Which we believe that you weed the garden, you make sure that you have one single focus. Our schools typically focus on 5 or 6 years on implementing the formative assessment process with quality. And then we have a series of protocols up there with enhancing pedagogy. We're going to do micro-teaching right now. And then we also have a protocol for advancing equity that would be a whole nother blether, right? And a lot of these could be one unto itself. But remember that the goal is about implementing the formative assessment process. And the reason why is look at the effect sizes that we have with that based on the visible learning synthesis. And this is another protocol, which is the formative assessment process, which is our classroom protocol. And you'll be getting a link of goodies. All of these protocols you'll get in a PDF packet, so you can kind of take a look at it offline. But this is the heart of our model, which would be the criteria around the formative assessment process. Now, we're going to watch a video from Paul's school, and then we're going to do some micro-teaching where I'm going to guide you through the protocol and take some notes. And then we're going to pretend that we're all teachers in Paul's school, and we're analyzing this data together, and then we're going to try to come up with what would be some next steps to strengthen what's already going on well in Paul's school. And so that's the point of impact teams. Every protocol is strengths-based. We look at the strengths that we have, and our job is to amplify those strengths. We do not go into organizations and look for problems. We go into organizations and look for strengths in terms of expanding student ownership and agency. And then our goal across the system is to amplify those strengths so we get a deeper implementation of the practices. So the effect size of this particular protocol is quite high, right? But what it does is it enhances our pedagogy by getting to see others, and it's done easily through video. So for schools that might not have the resources to pull teachers to do a lesson study, this is a really great other thing that you can do. It helps to expand innovation. It helps to provide models of success, which is one of the top sources of efficacy. And then it also helps to learn through others, which is another source of efficacy. So with this one simple protocol, we can actually help to strengthen the efficacy of our teachers. And this, we're not going to dig into this right now because we're going to demonstrate it, but there is a implementation rubric in your handouts for every single protocol, and we use this as a series of steps so we know that we're going in the right direction. So what we're going to do, Paul just kind of briefly set it up because we're halfway through.
You got it.
And then you'll get to speak last, Paul. Like I'll take them through the protocol, and then we'll go through evidence analysis and action together. We'll come up with some actions for your school, and then you'll speak last. Is that cool?
Great.
Okay, awesome. Set us up.
So this is Kyle, and there's a peer assessment going on. You're going to hear them thinking through a rubric and providing one another feedback. The very cool thing about this is that it's happening virtually. The reason why you don't see, well, you'll see her at the end, but you don't see her now is because she's on an iPad and he happens to be on a laptop. And then there are other students here actually listening to this conversation take place. One of the problems that we have is that we were good at this in person, but we have no idea how to do it online. So we're learning. And we're doing this through a feed-forward process using models and experimenting and innovating under the guise that there are no wrong answers. The only thing we can't do is nothing. We have to try. This video is about a week old.
Okay. So here we go. You gave them way too much information, you little stinker. Okay, that's all right. So here we go, and then we'll watch it, and just kind of keep in mind the kids are listening. Like Paul said, the teacher does bring them back in the end to talk about what they learned together. We're not going to see that in the video because of time today.
Sorry, Paul, I think we need the volume up a bit.
Is that, can you hear that?
No, it was fine earlier on, but it's not there now.
Let me, I don't know why it's not there now. I just went to present. Let me try, maybe I'll try my entire screen. Let me try this. Now,
we did a user check with this before we started, and it was fine. So,
yeah.
hopefully.
Let me. Can you hear that?
What the writing piece is gonna be about?
Oh, can you hear that?
The book.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, let's go back. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Okay, let's go back. I had my I think you're hearing it through my speaker. For some reason, which is fine. So we'll watch it again. It's not a big deal. Here we go.
Could you please go to the social criteria, please? You could check off the hook your reader because you put a question questioning the reader, and they might think about that, like that hard to think what the writing piece is gonna be about. And that can make the reader go more onto the book. And you did make a fact in there because you actually told me about the Underground Railroad in the introduction. And then I wanted to read more about it because of the fact, and you made a good questioning. And you made a good introduction in the first line, which is really good.
We can't hear you because you're on mute.
Oh, Kyle told me like maybe you should add like more of like when she was younger, more before, because I put in my writing piece, I put like after, like when the Underground Railroad happened and the Civil War. I didn't give her like more information about like my subtitle, my subheadings and stuff. So his feedback was like, maybe you should add more about your subheadings and stuff. So yeah, so I'm gonna take his advice, and maybe it's gonna help me like reach like the 5th grade, and it will help my reading more.
Good. So on the introduction, if I clearly let my subtopics unfold, that pushes me to 5th grade.
Yeah.
I want you to go add that in right now. Make that revision.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyle. What does everybody think about Kyle's feedback?
Okay. So for now, I am going to, now where is my Google Meet at? Where are you guys at? Oh, here we go. There you are. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through this protocol, and we'll just kind of work through it together. And so we're going to share out. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to just work through it together. And really all of the protocols are designed this way. And so we kind of tinkered around with the original micro-teaching research and thought that, wow, teachers can learn a lot through video. And that's why we have a YouTube channel. And in your resources, you'll see a link to our YouTube channel with hundreds of videos from all over the country. But so we could use open source videos like from a teaching channel or from, different websites that have really good models of formative assessment and action. But like in this case, this is teacher made. This is on Paul's instructional coach. And so she submitted this, but we can learn a lot from this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start out by you kind of sharing out some of the things that you've noticed in terms of the strengths that you saw in this little video vignette. And if someone could, man or woman, the chat room, or just talk out loud, I will just then jot down your observations. Remember, they're low inference notes, so there's no emotion to them. It's very objective. Just what are the things that you're seeing? We're going to analyze the evidence in a minute. So it's not that it's effective or not, just what are the things that you notice?
Okay, so we've got Sinead's starting poll with confidence of learners to share. Kirsten Player, focused on positive. So impressed by high quality, a relevant feedback linked to the success criteria. Constructive comments. Direct feedback.
What's all this one? Constructive comments. Okay, great.
Direct feedback linking to success criteria. Success criteria on display. Right.
Anything else?
Focus on the performance to achieve the outcome. Feedback demonstrated an understanding of the task and learning. Instant feedback. It's a good start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And we have enough. So instant feedback.
Yeah.
So typically what people do is they dig in and they would jot those notes down. And then when we get to the analysis part, right, we're trying to say, so what does this data or this evidence, what's the story behind it? Like, what are the things that this teacher or the teachers on this team, because I know PS13, they're doing all of this work as a team, right? So what does this evidence tell us about what this team values? And then also during the analysis of the evidence, we can also ask some questions. What are the things that we might be wondering about, right? And then remember, then we're going to talk about, okay, so what could we do that would even strengthen this awesome model even more? So what does this evidence tell us about this team's core values about teaching and learning? Or what does it just tell us about what this team believes?
Okay, so team value, pupil empowerment.
What else? Anyone want to add on?
That positivity grows confidence and better quark. I think that's meant to be work.
Right. When we work from our strengths and identify our strengths, right, we move faster, right? We accelerate. What else?
They value honest, direct feedback. Feedback important to move forward and create next steps. Progression understood by the learner. And the important one for me, learners are experienced, so this must have been a taught process.
And there was one that sneaked in as well about...
Yeah, I missed one further up, David. Did you catch it?
Yeah, so team trust people to take ownership of their learning.
Yeah. Child-led learning.
Right. So you get the picture in the facilitator. I'm just here to listen. I am always going to speak last. So like we have some real norms that we use, but the peer facilitator typically would then summarize. So what we've analyzed are some things that we believe that this team believes, you know, and the school believes. They believe in pupil empowerment. They believe that positivity grows confidence. They value honest and direct feedback. we can see that the team values feedback to create next steps. The kids probably value that as well. We could also see that the kids are talking about the 5th grade and getting into the 5th grade, so they understand the progression for a quality, informative introduction that the kids are experienced, and that led us to an inference that the teachers must be teaching into this process a lot, that the team probably trusts each other for them to be able to share a video even, right, regarding their practice, and that the team values child-led learning, right? And so then the last step is, okay, so what would we do? What would be some feedback or ideas that we could give this team to even strengthen what is already really innovative and strong? I think we all could attest to that. So what would be some things to amplify this and make it even better? So what are some ideas that we could give to PS13 from Scotland to improve their already effective practice?
I think there's a bit of thinking going on.
I think so. It's that
It's
thinking
all right.
time moment. Keener focus on learner next steps.
Yeah, it also could be, we could also think about it, since we're all instructional leaders on here, like what could we do to advance the practice of formative assessment based on the model that we saw as leaders? Like if you had this data, so like we could make it about next steps for the teachers at PS13, but we could also talk about like a little bit about what would be next steps to have deeper implementation of this process across the school.
So we've a few comments, Paul, coming up. Keener focus on learner next steps, views from other pupils. How do you evidence this learning? Time to work on it and then use next steps as the next success criteria.
Oh, that's cool. So use the next steps that were given as the success criteria the next time.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea, Paul.
I'm writing.
What else?
The layout of the protocol so that children can create the rubric using the next steps. Share this in teacher teams and discuss, compare with current practice, make decisions for implementation.
Yeah, so like that's a really good implementation thing, right? So if we're thinking from the quality implementation lens, as an instructional leader, we could actually use this, we could use this, show this to others, and then compare.
Yeah. Modeling to share practice with other colleagues. Encourage pupils to give specific evidence for their comments. And is it used for moderation across teacher teams in other schools? I think we've got some people on fire this afternoon.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about all of this video, I'm going to unshare here, is that that's exactly what Anthony Ladico did, the executive superintendent. We had schools initially, I think we were working with about 7 partner schools in the district of 80. We launched this work with videos from all those schools, and then it just caught fire across, it's 80,000 students in that particular district. And you just saw school after school after school start to excel. So I think your next step we saw actually take place. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Paul because he was the one that submitted the video. And I want Paul to kind of talk through a little bit like, what are some of those suggestions that really resonated with you? Or maybe there's some things that you've already done that connect with some of the ideas and next steps. So like now you're the learner and now Paul gets to save face by being a little reflective. But if you think about the protocol so far, we're really honoring Paul and his teacher's expertise through this. You know, if you're sitting around the table going through this, there's a lot of positive feedback coming at you about the process, right? So Paul, just make some, you know, we're role playing here. So like, think about how we did it in the school when we were there. So what feedback resonated with you from our friends from Scotland?
Well, the very first thing that I appreciated, and it was mentioned here also, is that they were very comfortable. Those were 5th grade students talking about what it means to be a 5th grade writer. And they weren't afraid. That's something that I very much appreciated, to acknowledge I'm not there yet. I've got a next step. I've got something out of that. And just going back to the restructure versus reculture piece that I talked about earlier, the culture of this school, and it wasn't always this way, but since we've done this work, teachers, students, parents are very comfortable with this is where we are, this is what we need to do next. So I'm very pleased with that. I also, when the teachers looked at this video, and I have my assistant principals feeding forward, not to be confused with feeding back, right? No one, especially now, figuring out how to teach online and peer and self-assessment, no one knows. So, you know, feedback is really evaluative and judgmental. And so what we had one 5th grade teacher do just yesterday is her next step was, in terms of implementation, what are the other students doing while Kyle was really looking at the rubric. Let me look at her piece. You did this, subtitles, all of that kind of stuff. But she was very concerned with what the rest of the children were doing. And so for her, just from a practical implementation standpoint, she wanted to figure out how to put everybody in a breakout room. It's something that she wasn't comfortable with. She actually tried it once. It was a disaster. Kids all over the place. How do I get everybody back? And we got feedback yesterday afternoon. She texted my assistant principal, who's sitting right over here, not there now, but she was. And she asked her students, how do we go into breakout rooms? And they figured it out together. So, and I saw some of that feedback too. What are the rest of the students doing while a child is going through this thought process? And we love models here. So maybe after watching a model, we push everybody out into a breakout room, so that more students are doing more thinking more often.
Okay, let me jump in, because I think we're veering away from the protocol. What out of that feedback, the last part, the action step, was there anything out of that feedback that resonated with you? Because you said, I'm writing this stuff down.
Yeah.
Was there anything that resonated with you? It's something that you'd like to try.
Yeah,
to
so
strengthen the work.
Use the next steps as the next success criteria is one of the things that I wrote down, and we're well positioned to do that because we were co-creating the success criteria with the students. So it shouldn't be something that is foreign, and so it makes it. I think that it makes sense for teachers to go there. They're comfortable.
Awesome. So that's exactly where we go. And so and I just want you to just think about my facilitation too, right? Because I think we're going to debrief this protocol now. What are the things that you appreciate about how this protocol could empower your teacher teams and students and your schools? So let's debrief the protocol for a minute, because I think that's all we're going to have. I had a very lofty agenda, which is all okay, because maybe we could come back and do the looking at student work at another time. But let's just kind of debrief the protocol. What are some things that you noticed about the facilitation of, please be kind about my spelling, the facilitation of the protocol, and how this protocol could support innovation in your own districts or schools or LEAs?
Any thoughts? Obviously some thinking going on, I think, Paul.
That's all right.
Sinead put a comment, it's much quicker than some of the processes that she would use.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, once we learn this evidence analysis, actually you can do it on chart paper, you can do it on Google Doc, you can do it on, you can do it in the air, right? You can just kind of talk through it. And teachers will start doing it with automaticity, you know, every time they do things. Some other things that you noticed.
Positive language.
Yeah. And so
how helpful and how child-friendly it is.
Right. And so I think we really dipped into the research regarding positive organizational scholarship and appreciative inquiry. And that body of research says we can move organizations a lot faster if we work to their strengths. And so that really resonated with me when I did my doctorate eons ago, right? That we really want to point systems to strengths. Other things that you notice.
Lots of voices on the table, different levels from older children, staff, local authorities, and allows everyone to develop the skills. And David, I think there was one further up that I missed.
The role of facilitators, about giving ownership to those you're working with.
Yeah. And so just a little note is we use the gradual release of responsibility for all of our protocols. So how we started this work at Paul's school and in the district at the time is I would come out and I would model each protocol. The next time I came out, and I think at Paul's school we did like a team in the morning, a team in the afternoon, like maybe 3rd grade, 4th grade. I'd model a protocol and then we'd go through it. And then the next time I came out, Paul would model the protocol for the team.
I was terrified. You made me do it. I was terrified. I didn't want to do it. I did it, but I was terrified you made me do it.
It was really fun because I think Paul will be the first one to admit that, and I think both him and I can admit this, when we took over our schools that were very low performing, mine had 10% of our kids proficient, 100% ELLs, Paul and kind of in the same boat. We were pretty top down. We had to get some things in order, right? But I think we both were striving for how do we share the leadership? How do we distribute this so teachers are leading it? So that third time we're out, the teachers are leading it. But what they get is they get a model from me. They get a model from their leader. And I got to tell you, like Paul was nervous and ornery and would say it out loud, but it just made it better. It really did. Like him being a little anxious around it from my perspective showed how vulnerable he was. And I think that relational trust just grew when Paul was put in the hot seat. And then Paul, like, you know, because of his vulnerability and because of his willingness to make mistakes in front of his peers, right, his colleagues, it just grew, and now they're doing this all on their own.
Yeah, and that kind of links to what Stephen Katz talks about, isn't it? About permission to not know is permission to learn, and about the leader demonstrating that about actually I'm learning as well, and it just sets that whole tone around the whole team about it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, and we should embrace that, and leaning into that kind of vulnerability.
Yeah. Any other thoughts out there? Because I think we're going to kind of wrap it up. Because we have about 5-6 minutes.
Yep. I think there was maybe a question. I don't know, Dominic Venditozzi. I think your hand was up. I don't know if you've got a question.
I actually pressed it because I was looking for. Yeah, I've not got a question. It's all right. Okay. Thanks.
No worries. Okay. Are there any questions at all that you would like? We've got Paul and Paul here, so an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. And if you don't, I've got a question that I'll come in with, but just want to see if there's anyone who wants to come in. Kirsten's got a question about what are the top books to read? Obviously, apart from that one, you know, Impact.
Yeah, I think one that Paul is represented in is our Peer Power book. And I don't have it handy here. It's called Peer Power. I think you can kind of see the side of the cover behind me. A part of it. Can you see that? There it is. Yes. But anyway, that book really lays out a peer power feedback framework on how to do peer assessment. And in the back, we have a lot of consultants and friends and teachers wrote chapters based on their particular grade level. So if you're a first grade teacher, there's a little mini chapter in there around how to do goal setting with kids. And then we have a social studies and a math chapter. And then there's also a chapter by Kara Vandas, a couple of chapters. She wrote Clarity for Learning. That would be another great book that I think would be great. Clarity for Learning by Kara Vandas and John Elmerode. And it's a wonderful book. But I think between Peer Power and that book, you have a lot of what you need to do this work. I saw some questions for Paul up there.
Yep. Janice, would you like to come in and ask Paul?
Hi there. Yeah, I was just wondering how long it took to ensure the kids had the right skill level to be able to carry out those peer conversations.
So probably those were 5th grade students. They've been doing it since they've been here, doing it like the whole peer conversation and really reflecting on co-created rubrics. But I think that we really saw it take off after about 2 years. And Paul, I'm thinking about the time that you came to school and you guys were genuinely surprised, like, wait a minute, all of a sudden it was there. And I remember that morning because you came to school and I said, I'm about to get killed. All of these principals are coming from across the district and I'm not sure. And then it was there. So that's a long answer, but about 2 years worth of asking kids to talk. And when I was, I'm a special education teacher by trade before I was the principal. I spent all of my time in the classroom doing it wrong, asking students to stay in their seat and not talk. But we framed the conversation about 2 years.
And you had, and like, let's back that up a little bit because there were bright spots in almost every single grade level from kinder to 5th.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, even in the first year, and what we're doing now, which I think is really different in the way that we do the work, especially because we've been consulting online, is we build a guiding coalition. I meet with the leadership team. We try to inspire them. And I do this via Zoom. We'll get like sometimes half the staff already excited. That's who we work with first. And we try to work with the folks that really want to do the work. And so we have a model team thing. And that's what we did at Paul's. But Paul is like a big dreamer. So every single school at Paul's, every single team at his school was a model team where some folks pick 2 teams in a school to do the work with, and then we amplified from there. Paul had me come out and work with every single team and take them through that. But you had bright spots all over the place in 6 months.
Yeah, we jump in the deep end all together. We hold hands and we jump in and we go. That's just how I do it. I do it a little bit differently now that it's online, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose I'm watching time, but I just see there's a couple of questions about, I suppose that links to Susan's question about how did you build the kind of teacher skills. So I suppose it was that kind of approach then, Paul, about building up their confidence and working together.
And one of the protocols is about, I forgot, of course I'm going to forget the name of the protocol, but one of the things we do, we meet with Paul, we worked with Paul, and then we plan a lesson and all of the teachers go and we all physically go into the classroom and watch the lesson take place. And then we work through an EAA protocol. What did you see? What do you want to try to do better? And that efficacy, that belief that our kids can do it. This is a Title I school. 75% of our kids qualify for breakfast, lunch, and some of them get a 3:30 meal as well. About 25% of my school at this point are English as a second language. There is some overlap, have individual education plans for some type of disability that they had. We have to build belief here that it can be done with the students that are in front of us. And doesn't matter to us if they're black or white or brown or whomever, they all do it. And they're all expected to do it, and they can. And that's, I think
another big thing for this district, I know we have 1 minute, is also we were doing evidence walks around 7 partner schools that were really, engaged in the work deeply. And so his leadership team was visiting other schools to get ideas. And every single school does it a little different. Paul's school really latched on to learning progression. Some schools latched on to stoplight rubrics. So there was a lot of innovation going on in the LEA during that time because of the leadership at the top that was allowing principals and instructional leaders to go from school to school to school, and we do evidence walks together. So there was just a lot of ideas coming at people in a really non-threatening way.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry, I'm coming back in because we are almost bang on time, and there's a couple of things I don't want people to miss out on before they go. First of all, the resources that Paul has shared with us, I will get them sent out to you in an email so that you've got direct access to them. It was in the chat earlier on. And also I put into the chat an exceptionally kind offer that Paul Bloomberg has made to us to join in with his Build Back Better program from the 2nd of March. The presenters involved throughout that program from March to May are exceptional, and it's an amazing free offer for you to join if you would. So I will send that out to all of my networks and on Twitter and on the email that comes out to you. I've signed up to almost all of them today, because the learning contained in them, Paul, thank you so much. It's the most incredibly generous offer, and we are very thankful for it. But we're also very...
Those consultants all donated their time. So I just want to give a shout out to them. So like, it's not really about me.
It's such a kind offer. And the other kindness that you do is joining us and inspiring us. And people are asking about books to read. And as a school leader who put all of this kind of work into practice in my own school, I couldn't believe it when I picked up leading impact teams, because in the journey from here to Birmingham to meet you for some work, I read the book. It's accessible, it's detailed, it's got everything you would need to start putting some of this work in place. So thank you so much. And Paul Martuccio, thank you again, adding the practical work that shows us that we all love seeing the children doing the work. It's been a fabulous session. It's alive on Twitter already. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to everybody who's joined us. We will email out. I know a few people have been texting me, they've not been able to get in, but we'll get the recording out to people as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much once again, everybody. Bye.